Also coming up on today's show, if an MP or councillor defects, should they stand for re-election? Will the government's plans for the police, drastically reducing the number of forces, save money or make policing more remote from local communities? And a year on from the Bibby Stockholm leaving Portland in Dorset, are the government's current plans for housing asylum seekers working and providing value for money?
That money could be given to local councils to buy and maintain and improve council housing, which could be used for asylum seekers, but could be used for everyone.
Well, that's all on its way. But first, let's meet the three politicians here for today's show. Clarence Mitchell is a Reform UK councillor on Reading Borough Council who switched from the Conservatives last month. Sean Woodcock is a Labour MP for Banbury and sits on the Housing, Communities and Local Government Committee. And Vikki Slade is a Liberal Democrat MP for Mid Dorset and North Poole and is her party spokesperson on Housing, Communities and Local Government. Welcome to the programme, all of you. Now, some big political news this week. The MP for Fareham and Waterlooville, Suella Braverman, defected from the Conservatives to Reform UK. The latest of a string of such moves that included, in our region, the MP for East Wiltshire, Danny Kruger, and, of course, Clarence Mitchell, who's with us today. Now, when MPs or councillors change parties between elections, they don't have to fight a by-election under their new colours. But should they have to? Well, here's what some of the constituents in Fareham thought about that.
It says a lot about the person that they can just up and choose to align with a different party, and it's not fair on the constituents and their votes.
Our whole political system is broken, has been for many years, and good on United Reform for changing that, and good on Suella Braverman.
It looks like all the good ones are leaving.
So if you vote a Conservative, you might not like the Reform policies, so I think there should be a by-election.
I never voted for Reform UK, and I don't even want to live in an area where Reform UK are in charge, so I'd like a by-election.
You've got to get rid of Labour, and I don't think Conservatives could do it, and so let's get him in. Let's get Reform in. Go for it.
Well, I'm going to start with you, Clarence Mitchell, as you recently defected from the Conservatives to Reform UK. What loyalty do you have to the people that voted you in?
I still have absolute loyalty to my ward residents. I will still be working as their councillor for the next three and a half months until the elections in May, with the same, I hope, diligence, commitment and integrity as I've shown throughout my last 4 years. I understand when people say there should be a by-election. I realised that I was coming up for re-election, hopefully, in May, and I felt it was the honest thing to do now, rather than standing as a Conservative in May, should I have been re-elected, and then doing it ahead of 4 years to come. That would be dishonest. So I felt there was an opportunity for effectively a by-election in my case, given that the end of my term is so close. The Conservative Party I joined more than 16 years ago disappeared from view very gradually from my point of view. Many of the original principles, if you like, that the party espoused and fought for then, I seem to have moved into a more centrist view, and I felt that a truly centre-right party is needed to save the country now. Okay. And people are understanding that, so I felt it was an honest thing to do in this case, and people will be able to judge me very soon.
They will. Sean Woodcock, should there be by-elections in Suella Braverman's case, do you think?
I understand the desire for that, and I understand why people in the constituency may think that. I think actually what's more important is what this actually says about reform. This is a party who say that the country is broken and that they're the people to fix it, but the people that they are bringing in to fix it are the people who broke it. And I think that is the message I think people should take home, is that can you really trust reform with what they say they want to do, when ultimately the people they are asking you to trust to implement the policies that they say they're going to do are the people who have caused the mess that we're in right now.
Vikki, what do you think? Should the people that are defecting go back to their constituents and ask for a vote of confidence?
I think there is a good argument for that. I think Clarence's situation is slightly different. I think that, you know, he's coming up for election, and coming to that point as you go into that is the right thing to do. We often see that people who switch don't then get re-elected because their residents are cross. I've actually raised something in Parliament about whether we could change the Recall Act, which allows local residents to call for a by-election if enough of them want that. So the Elections Act's coming up, so I'm going to see whether that might be feasible to do. I think that might be the fairest way to play it.
OK, well, hopefully throughout today's programme, I'm going to give you lots of time to get things off your chest. But do you have anything that you want to get off your chest? Something that really gets your goat? Because today we're starting a new strand that gives you the chance to say your piece to the politicians we have on the show. First up, it's Denise Richards from Hampshire.
I was walking up our lane doing a litter pick, which several of us in the village do, and I was absolutely shocked to find how much I found in a half-a-mile stretch. But these rural lanes are a perfect place where people come out of buying some fast food or they're having their lunch in their van, and then it just gets chucked out the window. The damage that it does as it piles up on these verges is enormous because it affects the wildlife. It affects the fact that you need a corridor that wildlife can safely travel through, and we're trying to rewild some of our verges in this village. I feel sad, really, I suppose, because I very much appreciate and love the countryside, and I can't really understand people's idea that it's okay to do this. I think it's another one of those issues which is obviously not going to be high priority in terms of finances, but it's another one that makes our country feel depressing, and a lot of people would like some things that made us all feel a lot more joyful at the moment. So I think there's small things like this that probably wouldn't cost very much money where you could do a lot more.
Denise Richards there. Thank you, Denise. And if there's something that really gets your goat, why not drop us a line on politics.south@bbc.co.uk. There it is on your screen. Rubbish. It is a problem that all of you have to deal with, I'm sure. Now, Vikki, the beaches in Dorset are absolutely full of rubbish in the summer particularly. Whose responsibility is it, and should it be, to deal with it?
So it should be everyone's responsibility to deal with their own rubbish. The council in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, they have tractors that go out at 3 o'clock in the morning to make sure that the beach looks pristine by the time people arrive. And I think it's disgusting when people leave it behind. I was famously on the beach during COVID, you know, having a go at people for leaving their rubbish. But I just touch on the piece at the side of the road. When I was leader of BCP Council, we did a piece of work with the lorries that are transporting the rubbish that aren't properly covered. And that's where a lot of that roadside litter comes from. And I think there is a lot of work that can be done in camera monitoring those lorries and finding them for allowing our verges to get cleared. Because it's really dangerous for roadside people to have to go and out in the middle of the night cleaning those roadsides, and it's incredibly dangerous for wildlife too.
Yeah, and we are all very thankful to those people that do it. How do we go about changing attitudes then, Sean?
I think Vicky's absolutely right. It's a collective effort. I mean, locally, I'm involved in a litter picking group in the ward I live in and used to be a councillor for, Grimsby Litter Pickers, and you know, volunteers have a role to play in that, in that sort of way. But you know, councils ultimately are responsible for maintaining their areas, their high streets, and you know, if councils are not doing a good job, it can put people off, you know, going to do their shopping in places because it looks unsightly. And you mentioned the beaches in Dorset, it can put off the tourists from going there. I mean, some of the things that the government are trying to do with regards to fly tipping is increase the penalties so people can go to prison for 5 years, and is looking at getting rid of some of the red tape that means that councils can't actually scrap the vehicles that are being used by often these criminal gangs, in order that we can deal with this blight on communities.
So some legislation there, and just Clarence, briefly to you. I mean, it is the role of councils. What are they going to have to do less of in order to do more work around rubbish?
Well, we're in agreement. It clearly is a huge problem, fly tipping, and just domestic rubbish that blows away from recycling centres by accident. That can be a problem. Glass broken around bottle banks. Enforcement is the key to change attitudes in the long run. But again, councils not only need to get their act together in making sure the rubbish is properly collected and recycled, but they also need to show some restraint. Occasionally there are cases where, I mean, I've got an 83-year-old lady in my own ward who's been chased for a £600 fine because one of her boxes with her address on it blew off we believe, one of the recycling drums. Her daughter was in hospital. She was distracted. She's a frail lady. And yet the council is still hammering her for £600, and her life's a misery now as a result. And I'm trying to get that rectified. So it's an issue the councils have to get a grip on across the piece. I'm pleased to see there were some arrests recently regarding some of these big dumps that have been found elsewhere in the country. I was shocked to see the Environment Agency doesn't even have data to know where these places are. And you're right, Sean, gangs are using these to launder money at cheaper rates than regular recycling plants. So it's far more complicated than picking up that plastic bottle, but everybody needs to do their bit.
Yeah, lots more to discuss on that. Thank you very much. Now, moving on, it was described by the Home Secretary as the biggest reform to policing in 200 years. There were certainly some big changes in Monday's White Paper. The creation of a national police service, dubbed the UK's FBI, and a need for police officers to be licensed to continue working. But the biggest one was probably the proposal to cut the number of police forces from the current 43 across England to perhaps as few as 12. So let's look at that a bit more closely then. Sean, if you're cutting the number of police forces from 43 to as few as 12, how does that tally up with the need for bobbies on the beat, local policing?
Well, I actually think it tallies up really, really well, because what people want is more police on the street. They're not so bothered about how many different forces there are carrying out the role of the police. So I think it's very much important. There's a lot of duplication, but what also we have so many variations, because you've got really big police forces like Thames Valley, like the Met, but you've also got really small ones like the City of London and things like that, where the variety in the services that they are able to provide to the public, so counter-terrorism, fraud, things like that, varies substantially because of capacity and things like that. That's why the creation of our FBI will take some of that work away from local police forces where that expertise isn't there, so that actually local police forces can get on with doing the neighbourhood policing that people really, really care about.
Vikki, how would it work for a constituency such as yours, which is largely rural, with huge areas, expanses for police to get across?
Yeah, there's always the potential this might be a good idea, but I have deep concern that funding that National Police Service has got to come from somewhere. There's no new money that's been announced. If that's going to come from police forces like Dorset, which is already the second worst funded police in the country, then actually we're going to end up with fewer people on the beat in our area. And we already have the problem in places like Dorset, Cornwall and other places where we have a massive increase over the summer in our population, which drags the police to places like Weymouth and Bournemouth and away from our smaller towns. And we've been lobbying the Home Office for ages to try and actually factor that in, and we're not getting anywhere. So I am a bit concerned that if we have a big regional police service, we might have even less of a say. So I will be lobbying to make sure that the smaller police forces, although they may be lost, we need to see more police on the beat in our communities.
Do you want local representation and lots more local police working bobbies on the beat?
If it means less people at the regional level because they're on the front line, I'm sure we would all agree that's what our residents want. They want to see police and they want the phone answer when they ring, you know, 999 and 101. At the moment, that's not happening. So, you know, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but I'm really interested to know where the money's going to come from, and not from you know, forces like Dorset.
So Clarence, much of the anecdotal evidence we hear from people is it's antisocial behaviour in city centres and town centres such as Reading, Portsmouth, Southampton. Do you think this plan addresses the issues that we see in city and town centres?
Well, a lot of what the Home Secretary announced is still quite vague, and we wait to see the detail around it. We're not convinced for the need for this so-called FBI-style force. What Reform want to see are more police officers, more visible policing, more community policing. A Reform government would bring in 40,000 new officers during the lifetime of the next Parliament. The strength of the forces is under strength at present. There's an argument for improved IT sharing. That's always been an issue between the different forces. But no, we want to see more visible policing. People need to be reassured, as Vikki says. If you try and get hold of your beat officers in a particular area, you have to go through a computer portal. The idea of talking to a police officer quickly seems to be something of the past, and that's got to change. We want to see greater stop and search powers. There's a whole host of basic core policing that needs to be improved before we reorganise the furniture around the forces. And even if it is done, it needs to be done in such a way that people can see the police and feel the police are protecting their community and their family.
Well, the timescale for these changes aren't until 2034, I believe, so obviously a lot more work to be done on these reforms. Now, still to come on today's Politics South. The government's changes to business rates were good news for pubs and music venues, but what about other parts of the hospitality industry? It's been a year since the Bibby Stockholm, the barge that was being used to house asylum seekers, left Portland in Dorset. Its time there was controversial, and in the year since, the issue has, if anything, become more controversial. Currently, more than 110,000 people are receiving government-funded support and accommodation, with significant numbers in our region, as Sophie Cridland now reports.
Last summer, groups across the south held anti-immigration and counter demos.
We seem to be letting all these people in illegally. They're being housed. We've got homeless veterans sleeping on the streets.
It's the government's responsibility to house asylum seekers if they can't financially support themselves. Griff is from the Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants, and they offer support services to asylum seekers.
Here we've got a rundown, extremely grim rundown hotel on one side, which is being used to house asylum seekers, where no one else would want to live.
He's talking about the beach hotel that houses families seeking asylum. Many anti-immigration protests were held here last summer, and Griff understands why they took place.
People are extremely angry at the conditions that they are currently living in as a result of the cost of living and related economic issues. And that anger is being directed towards migrants and asylum seekers. It's being directed completely wrongly.
Here in Portsmouth, there are 761 asylum seekers, mostly staying in accommodation like HMOs and hotels. The City Council has the most staying in the area compared to the rest of the region. Next is Reading with 685. Then in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, there's 618, mostly staying in hotels. And it's a similar picture in Oxford, where they've got 239 asylum seekers also living in hotels. And then in Dorset Council, there are 2 asylum seekers that don't need accommodation, but they are being supported financially with things like travel and food. Around 111,000 asylum seekers are being housed by the government here in the UK. One housing solution was the Bibby Stockholm, a barge moored off Portland on the coast of Dorset. 18 months after it opened, it was shut down by the new Labour government. Cedric from Cameroon was living on board, but was then moved to Portsmouth.
I've been persecuted and my life is in danger and I'll be killed if I go back. And they've attacked my parents and burnt our house and destroyed my dad's car. So that's why I'm here. I feel like here I'm at peace and my family also can be at peace.
His asylum application was declined, but he's appealed and has a hearing in the spring. Many of the anti-immigration demos are being held to protest asylum seekers being housed locally in hotels. Nick Ireland is the leader of Dorset Council. He doesn't think that they're suitable accommodation.
Generally, you would need somewhere where they can cook, for example. You have people cooking in bedrooms. You've seen those pictures, and somewhere like the MOD in Chickwell, I think is probably the place we would look to use, but we don't have control over that.
Nick is talking about the former army barracks in Chickwell, Weymouth, where Afghan families were resettled, similar to a military building in Sussex, where people have been protesting against male asylum seekers being housed in Crowborough.
I'm here because I think I'm worried for the safety of the town. What are 600 plus young men going to be doing? I worry about selling houses, price of houses.
An estimated £15.3 billion is how much asylum accommodation is going to cost the taxpayer over 10 years.
That money could be given to local councils to buy and maintain and improve council housing, which could be used for asylum seekers, but could be used for everyone. The fact is that councils are desperate for that kind of funding to improve the council housing that they have available.
Asylum seekers aren't allowed to work. You have people some of these people are doctors and nurses, and they're educated people with university degrees, and we could have used them and worked. They're not taking away people's jobs. We do need these people. And if you're paying taxes and you're contributing to society, we should be enabling that as quickly as possible. And if they're not allowed to stay here, then they should be deported or whatever the process is. That's the real solution to the problem.
Sophie Cridland reporting there. So, Sean, your government wants to stop using asylum hotels, but we've seen, like in Crowborough, sites like that are deeply unpopular too. So what is your party's answer?
Well, we need to process people quicker, and
how are you going to do that?
Well, that's already been happening. So the number of people waiting to have their application looked at has come down from a high in 2023 of over 120,000 to down to around 60,000. So
but the number of people appealing has increased.
But we have to get those applications, and once obviously they have a legal right to go through the courts. What we're then able to do is start removing those people. So we've already removed 50,000 people who had no right to be here, including 5,000 foreign criminals. I mean, what I would suggest the answer is not, though, is expensive gimmicks such as Rwanda and Bibi Stockholm, which Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick's fingerprints are all over. The government told us that, when they introduced Bibi Stockholm, that it would deliver greater value for money for taxpayers. It turns out, according to the National Audit Office, that it's actually more expensive than hotel accommodation. Nobody wants to see asylum seekers in hotel accommodation. I'm very pleased that a hotel in my own constituency is closing. We have to have somewhere safe, secure and habitable where these people can be housed properly while their claims are processed. And then, obviously, if they have a right to be here, they should be able to come in and work and support our economy, support their families. If they have no right to be here, then we need to be getting rid of them as soon as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a really good point, Sean. You know, it was the last government that just simply stopped processing claims. And I met people in Bournemouth when I was, working in Bournemouth that have been sat in a hotel for nearly 2 years. They're getting £8, a week to live on. They're not able to cook for themselves, as we've heard. They're not allowed to work. That is not a recipe for a good, stable society. And I'm really pleased that this government has started moving people through much more quickly. We've got to be moving people through really quickly, which is why we've suggested Nightingale centres, so that we actually invest in more Home Office staff to process.
Purpose-built.
No, yes,
Nightingale centres.
Nightingale centres.
But
like
where would they
had.
actually be?
I think there is an argument for using some military accommodation. Now, obviously, Crowborough's been really difficult. It's very close to the community. It's an open camp. I think there are some military barracks that are a little more secure. And Nick mentioned the one down in Dorset that may be suitable because it has been used for that sort of thing before. But I think if you combine it with good local policing, you can make it work. But the answer is to process people quickly, and when people lose their appeals, is to remove them immediately. Because it's when people disappear into the community, that's when the problems occur.
So, Clarence, I can't ask you to defend the Conservative Party's policies because you're no longer part of that party. But we heard in that piece there that maybe they should be allowed to work and actually contribute.
No. I mean, I'm pleased to hear that both of the main parties, which have abjectly failed to handle this across the last 14, 15 years, are now moving slowly towards reform's position, which is illegal immigration. Illegal immigration is one of the main causes of the discontent, the anger and the fear that many communities are now seeing, and we're seeing rise in certain areas. A reform government would deport them detain them immediately.
Children?
Would detain them immediately and return them at sea safely if necessary.
Clarence, how can people take reform seriously when you are welcoming the people, Robert Jenrick, Suella Braverman, who are responsible? You've talked about the 14 years of failure. Those two are directly responsible for this failure. Yet we're meant to look at them and go, "We've got it wrong once, but trust us again."
If you let me finish, and two people do not make a whole party's position on this.
They're really senior figures in your party who you've just welcomed into the party.
They have both said that they have regretted certain things and feel that the government hasn't shown enough contrition, the Tory government in the past, and they now feel reform is the way forward.
They both wanted to lead that party.
Show me a politician that doesn't want to lead their party.
Well, no, they actually applied to lead that party.
Indeed, but
and they've only come to reform because they both failed.
That's a democratic process. But apart from that, getting back to the point about illegal immigration, it shouldn't be controversial to say that we should people should adhere to the law and obey the
Nobody's
law.
arguing that.
No,
now.
nobody's disagreeing on that.
Clarence, what are you actually trying, very briefly, because we've got to move on, what are you trying to say?
I'm trying to say that reform would build specialised detention centres.
Credibility on this.
They would process them much more quickly, as Vikki was saying, is beginning to happen.
On this when it's Robert Jenrick, it's Suella
Well,
Braverman who are on your
let's
front
see what the
benches.
electorate feels about
Yes,
that in a
Clarence,
few months'
we have to move on.
Let me finish. They would be processed offshore if necessary.
Okay.
The idea of Baby Stockholm was actually a useful one in that it stopped British housing from being given to these people to use.
Okay, you've all absolutely been able to have your say, and now we will have to move on. Thank you.
If you've come here from a safe country,
now,
you should go back.
let's take a look at some of the region's other political stories. Storm Chandra hit the south this week. A man died after his lorry went into a river in the New Forest, and people living in static homes near Bournemouth had to be rescued and taken to temporary accommodation as floodwaters rose.
I'm very upset. Nothing is done at all. And I'm speaking for everybody on the site.
Celebrity chef Tom Kerridge welcomed government support for pubs and music venues, which will get a 15% discount on business rates from April. But Kerridge, who owns pubs and restaurants in Marlow in Buckinghamshire, says other businesses in the hospitality sector will struggle.
There is very little hospitality businesses that are making any money. Most are just treading water, surviving, or just going backwards.
Safety campaigners say the number of people injured on the roads in Cowley and Oxford has fallen by a third since low-traffic neighbourhood schemes were introduced. But people living and working on nearby main roads say the traffic problems have just shifted along.
Middle class, rich and affluent people, they want their street to be nice and quieter. And the people who choose to live on the main road, on the inner roads, they have to put up with all this pollution and congestion.
And we met the team of volunteers greeting new arrivals into Southampton Port.
Shops, toilet and Elizabeth.
Around 2 million passengers come into the city every year. They're given tips on what to see across the south. So Tom Kerridge says that rates relief should be extended to the whole of the hospitality sector. What do you think?
Very briefly, agree, certainly to hotels. The hospitality sector is absolutely vital for communities, for the country's economy. A reform government would actually abolish business rates for high street SMEs completely and impose a 4% online delivery tax on the big multinationals to offset that.
Okay.
But yes, reform needed.
And Sean?
I'm really pleased with what was announced this week. The key to all of this, as Tom Kerridge said, is not enough people are actually going into hospitality venues. So what we need to do is give people more money in their pocket so that they can go and start spending on the high street and in our great restaurants and hotels.
And Vikki?
Long term, we need full tax reform on business rates, but short term, cut the VAT for all of hospitality. That will give people more money in their pockets, it will drive the economy, and it will actually bring some life back to our high streets.
OK, more money in everyone's pockets. You all seem to be agreed on that. Thank you very much. Well, that's it for us this week. Thank you to my guests, Clarence Mitchell, Sean Woodcock and Vikki Slade. Got a bit heated there, but we are still friends. Now, next week, do you fancy working a 4-day week for the same money? More firms are signing up to it, but does it work for all kinds of jobs? We'll ask that next Sunday, but have a good Sunday today. Goodbye.